Rose Martinez learned young that the most dangerous men in Texas wore cufflinks. Her father liked to stand beneath chandeliers and talk about community investment, scholarships, and economic development, while senators laughed at his jokes and bishops blessed his donations. Cameras loved him. The city called him a self-made philanthropist. In private, people called him Don Esteban and lowered their eyes when they did. At 26, Rose could mirror his smile perfectly. Warm, respectful, unreadable. It was the first language she had ever been taught. The penthouse ballroom of the Martinez Tower glittered with crystal and old money the night before her wedding. White orchids hung in sweeping arcs from the ceiling. A string quartet played near the windows, overlooking the San Antonio skyline. Men with concealed weapons stood at every entrance, pretending to be event staff. "Your mother would have been proud," her aunt murmured, adjusting the diamond drop on Rose's left ear. "You look like peace." Peace. That was the word everyone used, as if she were an agreement and not a person. The marriage contract had been announced as a union of two respected families: the Martinez Organization of Texas and the Moretti Empire of New York. Tradition, they called it. Legacy. Stability. But everyone at that engagement gala 6 months earlier had understood the truth. It was a merger, and Rose was the signature line. Adriano Moretti, her future husband, stood across the room in a tuxedo that fit like armor. He was handsome in the way statues were handsome. Cold, expensive, and carved to intimidate. He met her gaze briefly and inclined his head as if acknowledging a business partner before turning back to a cluster of men discussing ports and shipping routes over 12-year scotch. He had never asked what music she liked, never asked if she wanted children, never asked anything not tied to logistics, appearances, or timing. Rose kept smiling for another 43 minutes. She knew because she tracked numbers unconsciously. Elapsed time, body counts in security rotations, transaction velocity in shell accounts. The exact percentage of cartel cash she had quietly funneled into legal enterprises over the past 4 years. Real estate trusts, freight subsidiaries, hospitality groups. On paper, she was the family's chief financial analyst. In practice, she was the architect who made blood look like clean revenue. She hated that she was good at it. At 11:18 p.m., she slipped from the ballroom and into her father's study, citing a headache to the women assigned to help her. The door shut behind her with a soft click. Mahogany shelves, leather chair, the faint scent of his cologne still in the air. A folder waited on the desk, left there by one of the family attorneys for final signatures in the morning. Prenuptial addendum. Final revision. Rose should have ignored it. Instead, she sat, opened it, and began reading. By page 3, her heartbeat had gone thin and hard. There were the expected clauses: confidentiality, inheritance structures, non-disparagement, arbitration through family counsel. Then a section referenced a private trust transition upon solemnization. Her legal ownership stakes in Martinez Holdings, including the portfolio her mother had left her, would transfer to a jointly controlled marital entity under Adriano's sole management authority in event of medical incapacity, emotional instability, legal jeopardy, or reputational risk. The language was polished. The meaning was simple. Once married, they could declare her unstable, seize everything, and lock her out of her own name. The next clause was worse. Any violation of family protocol would permit protective relocation at husband's discretion. Rose stared at the words until they blurred. She thought of women she had known in this world, cousins sent overseas for their health, widows who never appeared in public again, daughters who smiled once too little and vanished behind private clinic doors. Symbols, every one of them. Useful until inconvenient. The room felt suddenly airless. She took 3 slow breaths, then acted. By midnight, she had changed into a maid's uniform stolen from the service laundry, pinned her dark hair beneath a plain cap, and traded 6-figure heels for cheap rubber-soled shoes. She left behind her engagement ring, her smartwatch, and every trackable device in a guest powder room sink. In her apron pocket, she carried a burner phone, $6,000 in mixed bills, a fake ID under the name Rosa Morales, and a folded printout of bus schedules she had memorized anyway. She passed through the freight elevator with 2 catering staff pushing metal carts stacked with dirty plates. One of the guards barely looked at her. The second did, but his attention slid away at the sight of a bleach bottle and housekeeping badge. By 1:02 a.m., Rose Martinez, runaway bride, accounting prodigy, daughter of a kingmaker, was in the back seat of a cash-only private car she'd booked on her burner with false credentials, accepting the tracking risk because she didn't have time for anything cleaner. She didn't let herself cry. Not yet. Crying was loud. Numbers were quiet. Distance to station, 24.6 miles. Time to departure, 1 hour, 12 minutes. Likelihood of notice before dawn, high. Likelihood of survival if she stayed, near 0. Outside San Antonio, the interstate bus terminal smelled like diesel, old coffee, and rain on hot asphalt. It was the kind of place where no one looked twice at tired people carrying their lives in 2 bags. Rose bought a one-way ticket to El Paso in cash, avoided cameras where she could, and chose a seat near the rear with a view of both exits. The digital clock over Gate 6 read 2:37 a.m. She almost believed she'd made it. Then the man in the black suit sat down beside her. He was tall enough that his knees angled into the aisle, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, late 30s maybe. A faint scar cut through one eyebrow. He moved like someone trained to use small spaces for violence. No cologne, no unnecessary jewelry, just a silver ring on his right hand, etched with the Moretti crest. Rose went still. He didn't look at her immediately. He watched the terminal doors, voice low when he finally spoke. "Don't run," he said. "I was hired to bring you home, alive." Luca Moretti. She recognized him from whispered conversations and grainy security briefings she was never meant to see. Former military, retrieval specialist, the man families called when an asset disappeared or a problem developed legs. He was said to have a perfect record and no personal attachments. Rose shifted her bag into her lap, fingers finding the grip of the small pistol she'd taken from her father's desk safe before leaving. "If you're here to drag me back in a wedding dress," she said, "you're going to need a mop." A flicker at the corner of his mouth, not quite amusement. "We don't have time for this." "Then move." "Rose." The first gunshot cracked across the terminal before he finished her name. Screams followed, sharp and immediate. A vending machine exploded in glass. 3 men in tactical jackets rushed through the east entrance with rifles up, faces half covered, moving too fast for local cops and too coordinated for random violence. Luca was on his feet before she processed it, one hand gripping her forearm hard enough to bruise. "Not ours," he said. "Move." Another burst of fire shredded the plastic seating where they'd been sitting. People stampeded toward the wrong exits. A child wailed. Someone fell. Rose ducked instinctively, her accounting brain absurdly counting rounds while adrenaline drowned everything else. Luca pulled her behind a ticketing counter, fired twice from a compact handgun she hadn't seen him draw, and steered her through a door marked "Employees Only." Service corridors behind bus terminals all look the same. Concrete floors, fluorescent lights, industrial pipes sweating overhead. But terror made this one surreal. They ran past stacked boxes, a locked janitor closet, a caged utility room. Behind them, Gunfire echoed like metal doors slamming in a thunderstorm. "Who are they?" Rose demanded. "Ramos Syndicate, maybe Cruz. Doesn't matter." "It matters to me. It matters that they know your face." A man appeared at the far end of the corridor raising a weapon. Luca shoved Rose down, fired once, and the man dropped before she saw where the bullet hit. Luca didn't pause to check. At a loading dock, rain blew in sideways under a corrugated overhang. 2 buses idled nearby, drivers crouched behind wheel wells. Luca cut left toward an employee parking lot, scanning rows of cars with predatory efficiency. "That one," he said. "A minivan? It has keys." He swore under his breath. The van was boxed in by delivery trucks and a chain post, too slow to clear the exit under fire. He smashed the driver's side window of a dark SUV instead, reached in, unlocked it, and got the engine roaring in under 20 seconds with a tool from his pocket and wiring she didn't understand. Rose climbed in, shaking, wet uniform sticking to her skin, and they tore out through a half-open service gate as headlights swung behind them. Bullets sparked off asphalt near the rear tires. Rose twisted around in her seat and saw 2 vehicles pursuing, blacked-out SUVs without plates. "They're still on us." "I know." "You said alive. Is that still your plan?" He shot her a hard glance. "If I wanted you dead, you'd still be inside." That shut her up for 3 miles. They hit the interstate, wipers thrashing, city lights smearing into rain-blurred streaks. Luca drove one-handed while the other kept his pistol low by his thigh. His breathing never changed. He took exits without signaling, doubled back through industrial streets, killed lights for 20 terrifying seconds in a warehouse district, then rejoined traffic behind a freight truck to break line of sight. By the time the pursuing headlights disappeared, Rose's whole body ached from tension. She stared ahead, trying to steady herself. "You could have handed me over at the terminal." "Could have. Why didn't you?" He didn't answer for so long she thought he wouldn't. Then, "Because everyone hunting you tonight got the same message within minutes of your disappearance. That means this isn't about a bride with cold feet. It's about leverage." Her laugh came out jagged. "I'm aware I'm leverage." "No," Luca said, voice flat. "You're a trophy, a witness, and a liability. Different price on each." They drove in silence past dark fields and shuttered gas stations. Rose took out the burner phone, thumb hovering over numbers she could never safely call. Her father, her aunt, nobody. The network that had dressed her in silk would also sell her blood if the math worked. She looked at Luca again, profile lit by passing sodium lamps. "Where are you taking me?" "Nearest safe house." "I'm not going to a Moretti property. You're not in a position to negotiate real estate." She considered the pistol in her bag, the distance to his ribs, the odds she could shoot him and keep the SUV on the road at 90 miles an hour, low. "What exactly were your instructions?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "Bring you back." "Alive," she pressed. His gaze stayed on the road. That was the wording. Wording, legal language, loopholes. It sounded like every contract trap she'd ever cleaned up for men who smiled while writing death warrants in passive voice. Her pulse kicked again. Luca exited onto a frontage road and pulled beneath the dead sign of a closed roadside motel. No cars in the lot, except a rusted pickup with flat tires. He killed the engine and listened to the night for a full 10 seconds before speaking. "Here's what's happening," he said. "Your escape went public in channels it should never have reached. Either your people leaked, mine leaked, or both. Rival crews are converging because if they can't ransom you, they can use your body to ignite a war." Rose swallowed. She believed him. She had balanced enough ledgers to know the profit curve on chaos. He continued, "You step outside alone, you're taken in under an hour. Maybe by your father's men, maybe by people less polite. If I call this in, there's a 50-50 chance whoever answers sells our location before sunrise. And if I go with you, you might live long enough to decide who to trust." Rain ticked on the windshield. In the distance, a train horn sounded, lonely and thin. Rose stared at her hands. They were trembling now. She let them. The dutiful daughter had run out of script. The bride had burned with the ring in the sink. What remained was an accountant who understood assets, liabilities, and risk exposure. Asset. Information in her head. Shell companies, charity flows, ghost payrolls. Liability. Every man who wanted that information buried. Risk. Immediate and terminal. She lifted her chin. "If I'm staying with you tonight, I'm not cargo." Luca turned, studying her as if reassessing a target file. "Then what are you?" "Useful," Rose said. "You said this is leverage. Fine. I know where the money moves. I know which nonprofits are clean and which are fronts. I can tell you who has enough liquidity to hire a terminal hit squad at 2 a.m. A beat. Then another. He reached into the center console and pulled out a second handgun. Smaller, matte black. He checked the chamber, engaged safety, and handed it to her grip first. "Keep your finger off the trigger unless you mean it," he said. The weight settled into her palm like a decision. Somewhere between the penthouse and this dark, abandoned lot, the story had changed. She was no longer running toward anonymity. She was running through a kill zone with the one man trained to return her to the cage, and maybe the only one ruthless enough to keep her alive until dawn. Luca opened his door, scanned the shadows, then nodded toward the motel office. "Come on, Rose. We move in 90 seconds. She stepped out into the rain beside him, armed and shaking and very much alive, with everything left to lose. The motel office door stuck halfway, swollen from years of humidity and neglect. Luca forced it with his shoulder, and the stale air inside hit them like a damp rag. Mildew, old cigarettes, bleach that hadn't won. "Lights stay off," he said. Rose nodded and shut the door behind them. The room was little more than a desk, a dead soda machine, and a wall of yellowing key hooks stripped bare. Luca moved through it quickly, checking a back hallway, then 2 ground-floor rooms with a tactical efficiency that made her feel both safer and strangely colder. Room 7 had 1 bed, 1 lamp, blackout curtains, and a bathroom mirror cracked in 3 places. It would do. Luca locked the door, dragged the dresser in front of it, then crouched by the window and lifted the curtain edge 2 fingers width. No movement in the lot. "For now," Rose said. He looked over at her. Rain had soaked through her maid uniform. Dark patches clung to her shoulders and waist. "Change out of that before you go hypothermic." "With what?" Without a word, he crossed to a housekeeping cart parked in the hall, came back with a sealed package of motel-branded sweatpants and a t-shirt, and set them on the bed. Lost and found. Glamorous, I know. Rose almost laughed, which felt like a betrayal of the panic still climbing her spine. She took the clothes and disappeared into the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at herself in the cracked mirror. No diamonds, no makeup, no veil. Damp hair, escaping pins, eyes too sharp, too awake. "You wanted freedom," she told her reflection. "Congratulations. Here's the invoice." She changed, came out with a small handgun still in her hand, safety on. Luca was at the table with a folded road map, 2 burner phones, and a first aid kit open beside him. Blood had soaked through the sleeve near his left bicep. You're hit, she said. Graze. Take off the jacket. He started to object. She gave him a look she'd learned from auditors and nuns. He peeled the jacket off. The shirt beneath was dark with blood and rainwater. Rose set her gun within reach, washed her hands at the sink, and got to work with gauze and antiseptic. He hissed when she cleaned the wound. You do this often? Mostly spreadsheets. She taped the dressing in place with steady fingers. Sometimes emergency triage on men who think they're invincible. Good line. It wasn't a line. For a moment they stood too close in the dim room, her hands at his arm, his gaze fixed on her face as if searching for flinches. She stepped back first and sat at the table. Tell me what you know, she said. Not the sanitized version. Luca handed her one of the burners. Unknown channel blasted your photo and route vector to at least 4 syndicate groups after you left the tower. Not social, not gossip. Operational feed. That takes access. Someone wanted a scramble. Public chaos flushes me into visible custody, Rose said, already mapping consequences. Whoever secures me controls the narrative. Exactly. She reached for the motel notepad and began writing names in tight block letters. Martinez Inner Circle, Moretti Logistics, external brokers with reach in both markets. Luca watched her list grow. You memorize all this? I built half of it. She looked up at him. If Adriano wanted me quietly returned, he'd never allow broadcast exposure. Too many variables. But if he wanted me frightened and isolated, dependent on the first rescuer who arrived? She let the thought hang. Luca's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened on the phone. You think he engineered the leak? I think men like him never roll dice when they can stack decks. A car passed outside too slowly. Both of them froze. Luca killed the tiny flashlight and moved to the window, weapon raised. The headlights drifted on. No stop, no doors opening. He exhaled once. We leave in 5. They took a back service road out of the motel, no headlights for the first quarter mile. By dawn, they were northbound in a different vehicle. A dusty pickup Luca acquired at a truck stop by swapping plates and keys with brutal pragmatism Rose didn't ask about. She sat passenger side with a baseball cap low over her face, tracing routes on a folded atlas while he drove. No interstates longer than 15 miles, she said. Every toll camera is a liability. Agreed. Checkpoint probability increases near county lines with narcotics task force funding. Avoid Bexar and Travis main corridors. He glanced over. You've done this before? I've avoided audits by men with badges and cousins in both families. Same geometry. By noon, they reached a stash house outside Waco. Single-story brick, chain-link fence, overgrown yard with a swing set missing 1 seat. Inside, the pantry held canned beans, ammo, and 3 fake passports hidden behind flour sacks. Luca swept the place, then finally let himself sit. Rose plugged one burner into a battered laptop she found in a locked cabinet. It booted painfully slow. No internet card, but local files remained. Old shipping manifests, account ledgers, vehicle logs. She read in silence, scrolling, eyes narrowing. These aren't random supply runs, she said after 20 minutes. See this charity code? MRF-Hope? That's one of ours. Martinez Relief Foundation. Your public-facing nonprofit. Supposed to fund addiction recovery clinics. She tapped the screen. But these shipments match precursor chemical volumes, not medical supplies. Routed through Louisiana shell warehouses, then inland under church grant exemptions. Her stomach turned. Adriano chaired our joint philanthropy committee. He signed off on every transfer. Luca leaned in. Can you prove diversion? Not yet, but I can prove pattern. She opened a blank file and began building a timeline from memory and scraps. If someone's financing attacks to force the wedding on schedule, this is why. Ceremony legitimizes integrated accounts. Once we're married, anything dirty can be dumped into my foundation and laundered under my name. Framed and disposable, she thought. Bride today, scapegoat tomorrow. Luca's phone vibrated with a coded tone. He read the message, jaw hardening. What? Rose asked. State troopers just received an anonymous tip about an armed kidnapping suspect matching me and a distressed female matching you headed north in a dark pickup. She let out a short, humorless breath. Great. I'm now my own Amber Alert. We move. They were back on the road within 3 minutes. The afternoon heat thickened, thunderheads building in the west. Twice Luca diverted onto farm roads when he spotted marked patrol cars ahead. Once they passed a church marquee that read, God has a plan, and Rose wanted to rip the sign down with her bare hands. Near sunset, they hit their first cartel checkpoint. Unofficial, efficient, deadly. 2 trucks angled across a narrow county road, hazard lights flashing. Men in work vests waved vehicles through one by one, while another man photographed drivers with a tablet. Too organized to be opportunists, too calm to be law enforcement. Luca slowed before the curve and backed into a tree line without braking lights. Can we punch through? Rose asked. Not without turning this truck into confetti. She studied the map. There's a creek bed 1/2 mile east. If it's dry, we can bypass and reconnect south of the line. If it's mud, we sink. Pick your bad option. He looked at her for a beat, then nodded. Creek bed. The detour was barely a path, just rutted dirt and mesquite clawing the truck doors. At one washout, they had to get out and stack broken fence boards for traction, boots sinking ankle deep in sludge. Rose slipped, slammed her palm on rock, and bit back a cry. Luca grabbed her elbow, pulled her upright, hand lingering 1/2 second longer than necessary. You good? He asked. Define good. You can still swear at me, so yes. They made it through after dark, filthy and shaking, and reached another safe point. A shuttered mechanics shop outside Abilene with reinforced shutters and a generator that coughed like an old smoker before catching. Inside, Luca cleaned weapons while Rose cleaned numbers. She sat cross-legged on a stained office carpet, laptop balanced on a milk crate, reconstructing transaction chains from memory. Her brain, blessedly, still loved logic even when her life had become smoke and gunpowder. Okay, she said around midnight. 3 entities are bankrolling the teams chasing us. One is obvious, Ramos Front Company in Laredo. One is a contractor's shell tied to a private security firm in Houston. The third, she frowned. The third is a trust out of Manhattan with trustees hidden behind legal privilege. Moretti? Likely. But here's the part you won't like. The Houston shell received an infusion from a Martinez Agricultural Cooperative 2 days before my engagement gala. Luca looked up. Both families funding the hunt. Either they're coordinating, she said quietly, or someone with keys to both vaults is playing kingmaker. Silence settled heavy between them. The generator hummed. Rain began again on the metal roof, softer this time. Luca poured 2 fingers of whiskey from a dusty bottle he found in a desk drawer and handed her one. Their fingers brushed. Heat flashed quick and unwelcome. To bad options, he said. Rose took the glass, and surviving long enough to choose one. They drank in the dark office, shoulder to shoulder on opposite sides of a war map made from receipts and blood-stained gauze wrappers. She told him about college at Rice, where she'd once wanted to work forensic accounting for the IRS before her father needed family loyalty. He told her, in clipped fragments, about service overseas, about coming home to a family business that treated his military discipline as a marketable asset. "You ever believe in it?" she asked. "The code, honor, tradition." He gave a low laugh without humor. "I believed in rules. Then I learned rules are just prettier words for whoever has the bigger gun." Sometime before dawn, she fell asleep sitting against the file cabinet, pistol in her lap. She woke to a blanket over her shoulders and Luca at the window, silhouetted, still on watch. Complications arrived with daylight. A message came through one of Luca's secure channels from a contact in Dallas. "Safe transfer available. Family mediator. No blood." Luca stared at it, unreadable. "That's bait," Rose said immediately. "Probably. Delete it." He didn't. "If there's a faction willing to negotiate, we may need that door." "You mean the door where they smile, hug me, and lock me in a clinic until the vows are done?" His voice sharpened. "You think I don't know what they do?" She stood, anger finally outrunning fear. "Then stop acting like this is a disagreement between executives. They drafted legal language to erase me. They sent armed men into a bus station full of civilians." He rose too, and the room shrank around them. "I'm trying to keep you breathing long enough to use what's in your head. Then trust what's in my head." They held each other's gaze, both breathing hard. Then Luca looked away first, typed a short reply, and pocketed the phone. "What did you send?" she demanded. "Coordinates for a dead drop 40 miles east. If it's a trap, we'll know by who shows up." Rose closed her eyes, counted to 5, and reopened them. "You make unilateral calls again, I walk." "Into what?" "Into my own choices." He accepted that with a small nod. "Fair." By afternoon, they were moving again, this time toward a ranch safe house west of Fort Worth. One of Luca's old military contacts owed him a favor and had disappeared for hunting season, leaving the property empty. The approach road snaked through cedar and dry grass, ending at a low stone house with blackout shutters and a barn converted into a comms room. For the first time in 30 hours, they had walls that felt meant to withstand a siege. Rose showered, scrubbed motel grime and creek mud from her skin, borrowed jeans and a faded UT sweatshirt from a locked trunk of emergency clothes. In the kitchen, she found Luca stitching his own side, where an old scar had reopened. She took the needle from him without comment and finished the job while he sat rigid and silent. "Your bedside manner is terrible," he said through clenched teeth. "You're welcome." In the barn, powered by satellite uplink and a generator array, she finally had enough signal to attempt what she'd been planning since Waco. "My father keeps a mirrored ledger," she said, fingers flying over keyboard commands. "Encrypted partition, segmented keys. One key sits in his phone, one in family council archive, one in an offline token he keeps in a decoy cigar box because subtlety is not his gift." "You have the keys?" "I have my mother's old authentication phrase and a photographic memory." She cracked her knuckles. "Let's see if patriarchy is bad at password hygiene." It took 97 minutes, 2 brute force scripts, and 1 near lockout that made Luca swear in Italian. Then the hidden directory opened. Rows of files spilled across the screen. Payment schedules, enforcement logs, offshore transfers, voice note transcriptions. Rose felt cold creep up her spine as she clicked deeper. There, Adriano's private pipeline accounts tied to her foundation codes. There, payouts to media consultants, judges, clinic directors. There, contract references tagged ceremony priority. And then the file that changed everything. Retrieval protocol. Subject RM. Assigned. El Moretti Directive. Tier 1. Deliver alive for public matrimonial event. Directive Tier 2. Sealed. In event of non-compliance post-transfer, execute contingency removal. Death to be attributed to external retaliation. Rose stopped breathing. She opened the attached authorization page. Digital signatures. Adriano Moretti, Esteban Martinez. 2 witnesses from each side. She read it again, slower, because her mind rejected the letters. Execute contingency removal. A soft roaring filled her ears. She stood so quickly the chair slammed backward. Luca looked up from the workbench where he'd been cleaning a rifle bolt. What happened? She turned the monitor toward him with shaking hands. You tell me. His eyes tracked the page once. He didn't pretend confusion, didn't pretend shock. Just a hard stillness, like a man taking a bullet he expected and hated anyway. Rose's voice came out thin with fury. Were you ever going to mention that if I didn't play obedient bride, you were supposed to kill me? Rose, don't. She grabbed the handgun from the desk and aimed it at the floor between them because aiming it at him felt too easy and too impossible at once. How many miles was I from becoming your completed assignment? He set the rifle part down carefully, then reached for his sidearm, drew it, and, without breaking eye contact, went to one knee on the concrete floor. He placed the gun in the space between them and slid it toward her. I got the sealed clause after San Antonio, he said quietly. I didn't tell you because I needed you moving, not spiraling in a ditch while every crew in 2 states hunted us. Convenient. I disobeyed it the moment I read it. She laughed, one sharp, broken sound. How noble. His jaw flexed. You want the truth? I took this job because I thought it was retrieval. Dirty, but not murder. Then I saw their contingency and realized tradition was just a ceremony wrapping for an execution. Rain hammered the barn roof, sudden and violent. Rose's hand trembled on the pistol grip. How do I know this isn't another layer? Keep me alive until the altar, then clean up loose ends. You don't, he said. Not today. He stayed on his knee, unarmed, hands open. But if I was still theirs, you'd already be in a trunk. Silence stretched. Rose stared at him, at the gun between them, at the ledger glowing on the screen like an obituary with her name left blank for timing. Something in her finally snapped. Not into panic this time, but into clarity. Running had been phase 1. Survival, phase 2. Now came arithmetic. They need the wedding public, she said slowly, lowering her weapon. Not just for optics, for legal consolidation, for laundering scale, for my signature and my face and my eventual death to close their books. Luca nodded once. Rose set her pistol on the desk, leaned over the keyboard, and began copying files to encrypted drives with ruthless precision. Then we stopped trying to disappear. He rose to his feet, watching her. She met his gaze, eyes hard and bright. We go back. To San Antonio? To the wedding. Her mouth curved without humor. On my terms. Outside, thunder rolled across the ranch like artillery. Inside, among ledgers and guns and the wreckage of trust, they made the kind of decision that gets people buried or remembered. Luca reached for a second drive and plugged it in beside hers. If we do this, he said, there's no neutral ground left. Rose kept typing. There never was. He gave a short nod, the closest thing to a vow either of them could afford. Then, we built a plan. And for the first time since she stepped into the rain at the motel, Rose wasn't just trying to stay alive. She was preparing to burn the altar down. Luca pulled a legal pad toward them and drew a line down the center. Assets, he said, writing on the left. Liabilities? On the right. Rose almost smiled at the symmetry. Finally, a language I trust. For the next hour, the barn became a war room. She duplicated ledgers onto 3 encrypted drives, then split key fragments across 2 burner phones and a handwritten one-time pad she tucked inside her boot. Luca mapped routes into San Antonio that avoided known Martinez patrol corridors and Moretti-owned garages. He sent short, coded pings to 2 former military contacts who owed him favors and hated his family enough to answer. By the time the first reply came, 2 operators, no questions. Rose had drafted a disclosure brief with transaction trails, account IDs, and annotated names of judges, shipping managers, clergy, and politicians who took money to keep mouths shut. Prosecutor? Luca asked. She nodded. There's one federal team that's been sniffing around our foundations for years. They never had clean books. Now they might. She typed a fresh message into a secure dead-drop channel she hadn't touched since graduate school. To AUSA Celia Grant. I can give you Martinez/Moretti integration ledgers, homicide directives, and fentanyl route finance if immunity is negotiated before ceremony. Time sensitive. Verify with code phrase, Orchid Debt. She hovered, then hit send. The satellite uplink blinked red once, then green. Done, she said. As if summoned by that word, Luca's burner vibrated, then vibrated again and again. A flood. He answered one call, listened, and his face went blank in a way that scared her more than panic would have. What? She demanded. He turned the phone and showed her the screen. Every local channel carried her photo, cropped from the engagement gala. Perfect hair, perfect smile, white dress. Below it, a bright red banner screamed, Rose Martinez wanted for terminal shooting, possible armed accomplice Luca Moretti. A second ticker rolled beneath. Martinez Foundation funds linked to terror financing. Subject may be unstable. Rose stared. They made me the architect. They made you toxic, Luca corrected. No jury sympathy, no clean surrender. Another alert overlaid the feed, a leaked medical petition signed by private doctors she had never met, requesting emergency conservatorship due to paranoid delusions and dissociative risk. She laughed, but it came out like a choke. They filed the instability clause before the vows. That means judges are already bought. Outside, an engine growled at the end of the ranch road. Luca killed the monitor and grabbed his rifle in one motion. Positions, now. 2 headlights split in the dark, then 4. Vehicles, no plates, running blackout until the final approach. Too fast for county cops, Rose whispered. Too coordinated for bounty idiots. He passed her a headset, snapped his own in place, and keyed comms. Rafi June, confirm visual. Static, then a woman's voice from somewhere on the property line. 3 SUVs, 8 to 10 shooters, thermal scopes. Rafi came next, breathless. And a drone, north tree line. They found your uplink. The first shots hit the barn doors like sledgehammers. Wood exploded, generator lights flickered. Luca shoved Rose behind a steel workbench. If we lose this structure, grab Drive Alpha and move to the drainage culvert. Do not wait for me. I'm not leaving you. That wasn't a suggestion. More rounds ripped through siding. June's rifle answered from the ridge, crisp and controlled. A man dropped near the fuel tank. Another dragged him, got hit, stayed down. The drone buzz rose louder, insectile and wrong. Rafi shouted over comms. Payload, underbelly, incendiary. Down! Luca roared. The blast punched through the western wall in fire and splinters. Heat rolled over Rose's face. The comms rack sparked and died. One of the encrypted drives on the table melted inside its casing before she could reach it. She crawled through smoke, grabbed the laptop and 2 remaining drives, and shoved them into a duffel while Luca fired in disciplined bursts that forced attackers back from the door. Move, he barked. They ran bent low through the rear tack room into whipping rain and mud, flames climbing behind them. June appeared out of darkness, rifle slung, blood at her temple but eyes clear. Rafi's pinned at the generator trench, she said. Luca hesitated half a heartbeat, then swore. Go, I'll pull him. Rose caught his sleeve. You said don't wait for you. He met her gaze, rain streaming off his hair. Start the truck. She did. Engine coughed, caught. June jumped in passenger side and laid suppressive fire out the cracked window while Rose reversed blind through cedar, branches slamming the windshield. Luca emerged dragging Rafi by the vest, both soaked in mud and blood. They piled in, and Rose hit the throttle just as the second explosion took the barn roof in a bloom of orange that lit the whole ranch road like sunrise. In the rearview mirror, the safe house they'd claimed for one night burned to its stone bones. Everything they'd built in there, comms, maps, fallback routes, OneDrive copy, went with it. They regrouped 40 miles south in an abandoned feed mill with no power and one concrete room dry enough to spread gear. Rafi's left leg was torn open from shrapnel. June stitched him while muttering profanities that sounded affectionate only because he was still alive to hear them. Rose tried to access the duplicated files. Drive beta mounted, then spat errors. Corrupted sectors from heat exposure. Drive gamma opened. But 3 key folders were missing, including the full signature authentication page that tied the kill clause to both patriarchs. No. Rose clicked faster, as if speed could bully physics. Come on. Luca crouched beside her. What's gone? The directives are still there, partial ledgers too, but chain of custody metadata is fragmented. She looked up, eyes blazing. Defense will say fabrication. They'll bury us in forensics arguments. Can we rebuild? Not tonight. He absorbed that without flinching. Then we get the original token. She froze. From my father's study? Or whoever moved it. Rafi groaned from the cot. Bad news on that front. He held up his tablet where a geotag pulse blinked on a map of downtown San Antonio. Martinez Tower vault token pinged 30 minutes ago. Then signal jumped to St. Bartholomew Cathedral Annex. Rose felt the world narrow. Adriano has it. Looks that way, Rafi said. Her burner rang. Unknown number, she answered before Luca could stop her. Adriano's voice slid through the speaker smooth as oil. Rosaria, you've made such a mess. Rose turned on speaker. Where's my aunt? A soft chuckle. Straight to family. How touching. She's safe for now, as long as you stop sending bedtime stories to federal prosecutors. Luca mouthed, trace it. Rafi started typing one-handed, jaw clenched. Adriano continued, You'll come home. We'll proceed as planned. You'll smile, sign, and save everyone this unpleasantness. And if I don't? A pause. Then the phone received a video file. Rose opened it with shaking fingers. Her aunt sat tied to a chair in what looked like a wine cellar, bruised but conscious. Beside her, Matteo, the junior analyst Rose had hired fresh out of UTSA because he still believed numbers could be honest, knelt with zip ties around his wrists, blood crusted at his lip. A masked man stepped into frame and pressed a gun to Matteo's neck. Adriano's voice returned, almost bored. I'm told you care about your employees. Be at the old rail freight yard in 1 hour with all copies of the ledger. Come alone, or I reduce your support staff." The line went dead. Rafi cursed. Call routed through 6 relays. No luck. Luca was already loading magazines. It's a trap. Rose wiped at her face angrily when she realized she was crying. "I know. We still go." June looked between them. "With respect, that yard's a kill box." Rose met her eyes. "He picked Matteo because he knows I won't gamble human beings like line items." Luca took a breath that sounded like pain. "We go in layered. June high perch, east crane. Rafi remote eyes if he can stay conscious. Rose stays behind me at all times." "No," Rose snapped. "He asked for me. If he doesn't see me, he starts shooting." "Rose, that's not debate, Luca. That's arithmetic." He stared at her a long second, then nodded once, violent and unwilling. "Fine, but if I say move, you move." The freight yard smelled like rust and wet diesel, acres of dead track under floodlights that flickered with generator power. Too quiet, too staged. Rose walked into the open with empty hands visible. Luca a shadow 15 feet behind in a worker jacket and cap. June's voice crackled faint in their earpieces from a crane tower. "No visual on hostages. I count 6 heat signatures, maybe more in containers." A spotlight snapped on, blinding. Matteo was dragged out from behind a shipping container and shoved to his knees. No ant in sight. "Where is she?" Rose shouted. A voice boomed from hidden speakers. Adriano again, amused by distance. "You brought friends. Disappointing." Luca moved before she saw what he saw. Muzzle flash from a catwalk. Gunfire erupted from 3 angles. "Down!" June shouted, firing from her perch. Rose hit concrete hard, scraping her palms raw. Luca pulled her behind a steel wheel assembly as rounds sparked around them. Rafi fed positions over comms until his voice cut to static with a strangled cry. "Rafi!" June yelled. No response. Matteo screamed. Rose looked up in time to see him jerk, chest blooming red, then collapse face first between rails. For one suspended second, all sound tunneled away. Then Luca's hands were on her shoulders, shaking her back into motion. "Rose, move!" She fired blindly toward a strobing muzzle, didn't know if she hit anything. June dropped one shooter on the catwalk before a return burst shattered her scope and forced her to bail from the tower ladder. They retreated under fire through maintenance trenches, Luca covering, Rose half running, half falling, with grief burning a hole through her ribs. By the time they reached the truck, the yard behind them was empty, except for lights and rain, and Matteo's body cooling on steel. The trap had never been a trade. It had been a message. And it had landed. They hid before dawn in the basement of a deconsecrated chapel on the outskirts of town, stone walls sweating with age, saints' faces chipped and eyeless along the aisle. June had a fractured wrist. Rafi was alive but fevered, leg wound infected, murmuring nonsense between clenched teeth. Rose sat on the lowest step and stared at her hands. Dried blood in the creases, some hers, mostly not. For the first time since she ran, she couldn't make numbers behave. Matteo was 23. He liked bad office coffee and wore superhero socks under tailored suits. He had died because she came to a rail yard believing one devil might keep a promise for leverage. Luca found her there after setting a drip line for Rafi. He knelt to clean the cut on her palm. She let him, numb. "Say it," she whispered. He looked up. "What?" "That this is my fault." His jaw tightened. "No. I brought him into this world. I told him we were doing legitimate transformation work. I told him if he kept his books clean, he'd never have to touch the dark side." Her laugh cracked. "I turned him into a hostage with a payroll account." Luca tied the bandage, hands precise despite shaking she hadn't noticed before. When he spoke again, his voice had lost all its steel. "I retrieved a girl in Palermo 12 years ago," he said. 19. Ran from an engagement to a cousin of ours. I found her in a ferry terminal, terrified, barefoot. He swallowed. I brought her back because that was the job. 3 months later, she overdosed in a private clinic. Rose went very still. I told myself I didn't kill her, he said, staring at the floor. I told myself I followed protocol, and what happened after transfer wasn't mine. I built an entire life out of that lie. His fingers curled into fists against his knees. When your sealed order came through, I saw her file number before I saw your name. Same language, same contingency euphemisms. I knew exactly what your ending looked like if I obeyed. Rain tapped at stained glass above them like fingernails. I am good at violence, Luca said quietly. I am good at finding people who don't want to be found. I don't know if there's any ledger where that balances out. But I know this. If I fail you, they don't just bury you. They make you the villain in your own funeral. Rose reached for his hand. He let her barely. I'm afraid, he admitted, eyes finally meeting hers, stripped raw. Not of dying, of becoming useful to them again in one moment of weakness, of choosing the tactical move and losing the human one, of watching you become another name I explained to myself at 3 a.m. She squeezed his hand harder. Then don't explain me. Stand with me. His breath hitched once. He nodded. They sat like that in the half-dark, while upstairs wind moved through broken hymnals. Two people with blood on their shoes and no innocence left to bargain. At 4:11 a.m., Adriano made his final move. Every major network cut to an emergency family statement from St. Bartholomew Cathedral. Esteban Martinez stood beside Moretti Capos and announced that, due to security concerns and Rose's deteriorating mental condition, the wedding would proceed at noon under private guard and international press witness to protect family legacy from criminal interference. Then Adriano stepped to the mic, solemn and heartbroken for the cameras. If Rose appears with armed associates, he said, we cannot guarantee the safety of those she has endangered. A second feed leaked instantly to encrypted channels. This one wasn't for cameras. Rose watched it on the chapel laptop, pulse thundering. Her aunt, now gagged. Two foundation drivers beside her, both middle-aged fathers Rose knew by name. A digital clock on the wall behind them, counting down from 7:49:32. Adriano's voice over black screen. By noon, bride at altar in original gown, no law enforcement visible. Any disruption, timer reaches 0, bodies stream live. Bring the family token if you still have delusions of leverage. Rafi slammed his fist weakly against the cot. He's forcing a clean corridor. Everyone else stays back while he controls sight lines. June, pale but steady, lifted her splinted wrist. Then we don't stay back. Luca was already on his phone. Celia Grant answered. He said to Rose, she wants proof and your sworn statement now. Says she can fast-track conditional immunity and tactical warrants if she gets probable cause on a live public event. Rose stood, exhaustion burning off into something sharper. Patch her in. 10 brutal minutes later, she was on encrypted video with AUSA Celia Grant, reciting account numbers, naming Shell trustees, identifying judges who took wire transfers, and reading the kill clause language out loud while Grant's team recorded and authenticated her biometrics. Grant's face stayed hard. I can move a strike package to perimeter by ceremony time, but I can't storm on your word alone if hostages are wired. We need public probable cause and visual confirmation of command participants. Rose understood. She had to walk into the room and crack it open from the inside. She ended the call, looked at Luca, June, and a feverish Rafi, and made the choice with no space left for fear. "We go to the cathedral," she said. "He wants a bride. He gets one with a microphone." Outside, dawn bled gray across San Antonio. Sirens sounded somewhere far off, too distant to help. On every screen, her face rotated beneath headlines, calling her unstable, armed, and missing. Luca handed her a small earpiece and the last intact drive. "Once we start," he said, "there's no extraction guarantee?" Rose took both. There never was. They moved for the door of the ruined chapel as the hostage countdown ticked under 8 hours, and the city ahead waited like a loaded gun. They reached St. Bartholomew just after 10. The cathedral rose out of downtown limestone and stained glass, beautiful and predatory. Its front steps lined with white floral arrangements and men pretending to be ushers. Media vans crowded the square behind police barricades, cameras angled for romance, scandal, blood, whichever came first. In the armored van, half a block away, Rose sat while June secured the transmitter under the lace edge of her bodice, and Luca checked the tiny in-ear twice. "The bridal suite is on the south transept level," June said. "2 visible guards, likely more in the hall. Rafi has patchy access to internal cameras." From the front seat, Rafi, gray-faced, sweating through antibiotics and pain, lifted a thumb without turning around. "A V-booth is old diocesan software. I can hold an access window for 14 seconds, maybe 20 if the saints are merciful." Rose almost smiled. "You're Jewish. Then we're all in trouble." Luca knelt in front of her. He wore a black suit, no tie, an earpiece hidden in the curl of his hair. He looked like what he had always been, a weapon with a heartbeat. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "I do." She touched the flash drive hidden in her glove seam. "He asked for a bride, no law visible. If I walk in with an army, my aunt dies before the first hymn." His jaw flexed. "If I call abort, you run to the west sacristy exit and do not look back." "I know." He hesitated, then reached for her wrist. "Rose." She met his eyes. In them she saw fear stripped down to devotion and violence held on a leash by her name. "I'm coming back out," she said quietly. "With them." He nodded once, like swallowing glass. "Then burn it down." The bridal suite smelled like powder, lilies, and old stone. Her original gown hung on a carved wardrobe door, exactly where she'd left it the night she ran. Silk, hand-beaded bodice, cathedral train, tradition sewn into every seam. A woman from the Moretti side helped zip her in with shaking hands and eyes fixed politely on the wall. 2 armed men stood outside the half-open door, visible in the mirror behind her. Adriano entered without knocking. He wore a charcoal suit and a white rose in his lapel. He looked camera-perfect, almost tender right up until he smiled. "Rosaria," he said, "I knew you'd choose family." Rose stood and turned, veil over her shoulders like surrender. "Show me them." He lifted his phone and played a live feed. Her aunt, the 2 drivers, all 3 bound in a stone utility room with a digital timer now under 2 hours. A man in tactical black stood beside them, holding a tablet. "You'll behave," Adriano said. "No dramatics, vows, signatures, photographs. Then we discuss your misunderstanding in private." Rose kept her face blank. "And if I don't?" He stepped closer, voice dropping. "Then I bury your aunt where your mother can't find her." Rage surged so hard she tasted copper. She let it pass through her like current and become something usable. "I need 10 minutes alone to pray," she said. He laughed softly. Since when? Since you made me choose who dies. He studied her, then checked his watch. 5. He nodded to the guard and left. As soon as the door clicked, Rose moved to the kneeler by the side wall, lifted the embroidered cushion, and found the maintenance access panel she remembered from charity planning committees and staged holiday masses. Finance had approved the multimedia upgrade herself 3 years ago. Rafi's voice crackled in her ear. Window open in 3, 2, now. She plugged the drive into the concealed port. Directory prompt flashed. Her fingers flew. Upload, Cathedral Screen System Mirror. Push, press contacts plus DOJ Secure Link Delay. Trigger, Live Mic Activation. 6 seconds, Rafi whispered. You're beautiful and terrifying, by the way. Focus. Done. Package armed. You speak, it goes everywhere. She closed the panel, replaced the cushion, and folded her hands like a saint. When the guard returned, Rose Martinez was kneeling in white silk, head bowed, the picture of obedience. The cathedral was full. Capos and councilmen sat in polished pews beside donors and gossip columnists. Men in tailored suits touched rosaries and sidearms in equal measure. At the front, beneath a crucifix older than any cartel, Esteban Martinez stood in the first row, expression carved from pride and threat. Luca took position near the west aisle with the other security detail, moving like he belonged and scanning like he didn't. The organ swelled. Rose walked. Every step down the nave felt like walking into the mouth of a furnace. Cameras tracked her. Whispers slid like knives. At the altar, Adriano extended his hand. She let him take hers. The priest began in Latin and English, voice steady over a room wired for murder. Rose listened to none of it. She listened to the clock in her blood, to June breathing in her ear from a rooftop, to Rafi cursing softly through code as he held the network together with one good hand. When the priest reached, "If anyone objects to this union," Rose took the microphone from its stand. The priest startled. Adriano tightened his grip hard enough to hurt. "Rosaria," he murmured through his smile. "Don't." She lifted the mic. "My name is Rose Martinez," she said, clear and amplified. "And this ceremony is a criminal consolidation event." A ripple of confusion moved through the pews. Adriano's smile cracked. On cue, every cathedral screen lit at once. Account ledgers flooded the walls, offshore transfers, coded homicide payments, fentanyl route finance through Martinez Relief Foundation, signatures, timestamps, encrypted call logs. Then the retrieval protocol appeared in black and white. Directive Tier 2. Execute contingency removal. Gasps turned to shouts. Esteban surged to his feet. "Turn that off." Rafi's hacked feed overrode the controls. New files dropped, payment lists to judges, sheriffs, clergy. Audio clips followed, Adriano's voice approving post-ceremony cleanup. Esteban authorizing instability petition deployment. Chaos detonated. Men reached inside jackets. Women screamed and ducked behind pews. The priest stumbled backward, crossing himself. Luca drew and fired one controlled shot into a chandelier chain above the side aisle. Crystal rained down and blocked 3 shooters from line of sight. "Everybody down!" Rose shouted into the mic. "Civilians to the floor, hands visible." Adriano tried to wrench the microphone away. She pivoted, drove her elbow into his sternum, and kept speaking. "I have entered a federal cooperation agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office under conditional immunity," she said. "Agents are in position. If you fire, you add attempted murder of civilians to your indictment." Some men hesitated. Others didn't. Gunfire cracked from the rear transept. June's voice snapped in Rose's ear. "East balcony hostile down. Annex team moving on your phrase." Adriano lunged, grabbing Rose's hair, hissing in her ear. "You stupid, ungrateful!" She slammed the heel of her palm into his nose, broke free and shouted into the mic, "Account 713 is closed." Outside, unmarked tactical units surged toward the annex doors. Inside, Esteban strode up the altar steps with a pistol in hand. "Put it down, mija," he said, voice low and lethal. "You are sick. You are confused. Come with me, and I fix this." Rose stared at the man who had taught her to count and lie in the same breath. "You already fixed it," she said. "You signed my death order." His hand shook once, then steadied. "I signed for peace. You signed for control." He raised the pistol. Luca moved first, crossed the aisle, slammed Esteban's wrist against a marble pillar, gun skidding across stone. 2 Martinez soldiers rushed him. Luca dropped one with a shoulder strike and disarmed the second without taking his eyes off Rose. Adriano was already moving behind her, blood running from his nose, a ceramic blade flashing from his cuff. Rose saw him in the polished brass of the candlestick a half-second before he struck. She drew the compact pistol hidden in her bouquet wrap and fired once. The shot tore through Adriano's shoulder and spun him to the floor. He screamed, clutching the wound, white Rose turning red. "Don't touch me again," Rose said, voice shaking but loud enough for every microphone in the room. Sirens swelled outside like a tide finally breaking. Federal agents in tactical gear poured through side entrances, weapons up, shouting commands. Men were dragged from pews, cuffed face down on holy stone. Camera operators kept filming until an agent shoved one behind cover. Rose stood at the altar in her wedding gown, gun lowered but steady, while her world came apart exactly the way she had planned. Adriano didn't surrender. Even bleeding out over the cathedral steps, he fought like a cornered animal. 2 agents hauled him toward a column. He twisted, dislocated one thumb, and snatched a fallen phone from the floor. He screamed into it in Italian, "Zero the clock! Do it now!" Rose moved before anyone else understood. She kicked the phone from his hand, dropped to her knees, and grabbed it as it skittered beneath a pew. The call was still live. Audio from the annex utility room, muffled voices, the beep of the hostage timer. "Code?" a man demanded over speaker. "Confirm code." Rose recognized the cadence from Ledger voice samples. "Pietro Valli, Moretti Logistics Lieutenant, paid through 3 shells and 1 parish maintenance contract." She switched the phone to Mike and spoke in Adriano's tone pattern, crisp and contemptuous. "Stand down. Federal breach in North Corridor. You trigger now, you die first." A pause. Confusion. Then Valli. "Adriano." Rose didn't blink. "Stand down. Move to fallback route C." In her ear, June shouted, "Annex team at door. Keep him talking." Rose walked her voice tighter. "Pietro, listen to me. Route C now." The line crackled with distant shouting, boots, a crash of metal. Then an FBI voice thundered faint through the phone. "Hands where I can see them." June exhaled. "Hostages secure. Repeat, hostages secure." Rose's knees almost gave out. Adriano saw the relief hit her and smiled through blood. "Still think you won?" he rasped. He jerked suddenly, throwing his weight into the nearest agent, and bolted toward the side chapel with one arm useless and fury keeping him upright. Luca chased, 2 agents behind him. Rose followed. Side chapel doors slammed. By the time she reached them, Luca had kicked one open. Inside, candles smoked from gunfire blasts, saints' statues shattered, marble slick with blood and wax. Adriano held a novice altar boy in front of him. Forearm around the child's throat, stolen pistol pressed to the boy's temple. Everyone froze. "Back up!" Adriano shouted, wild-eyed, voice cracking. I walk or he dies." The boy whimpered, maybe 15. Cassock torn, shaking so hard his teeth clicked. Luca lowered his weapon a fraction. "Adriano, look at me." "No. You don't get to talk to me like we're brothers. You shoot him, there is nowhere left to run." There was nowhere to run when she turned. Adriano snarled, jerking his chin at Rose. "Do you understand what she destroyed? Ports, judges, senators, decades of architecture." Rose stepped sideways, slow, keeping his attention. "You built an empire on overdose deaths and dead girls in clinics." His gaze snapped to her. "I built order. Men like your father and mine only understand order. Order isn't a graveyard with branding." His lips peeled back. "You were never meant to lead. You were meant to absorb impact." He tightened his hold on the boy and started backing toward a service door. Luca shifted to angle a shot, but Adriano read him and jammed the pistol harder into the boy's head. "No heroics," Adriano said. Rose saw it then, the slight hitch in his wounded shoulder, the way he compensated his grip one-handed, the line of sight between the brass holy water font and his injured side. Numbers, geometry, timing. She took one step toward him, palms open. "You're right," she said. "I was meant to absorb impact." Adriano sneered. "Finally." She kicked the rolling brass font hard across the stone. It slammed into his wounded shoulder. He screamed, reflexively loosening his grip. The boy dropped, scrambling away. Luca fired, once low, shattering Adriano's knee without hitting the child. Adriano collapsed, pistol skittering under the confessional. Agents swarmed him. He fought anyway, biting, cursing, blood and spit on his teeth. They pinned him face down, zip-tied wrists, leg pumping red through expensive fabric. As they hauled him upright, he locked eyes with Rose. "This city will eat you," he hissed. "Without us, everything collapses." Rose walked up until they were inches apart. "Maybe," she said, "but it won't collapse around my neck." She turned to Vali, dragged in moments later from the annex in cuffs, and pointed to the nearest camera, still filming from the doorway. "State your name," she said. He glared. Rose nodded to an agent, who produced printed transfer records from the drive. "Pietro Vali," she said into the camera for him. "Recipient of $4.2 million through St. Bartholomew Maintenance Trust, account ending 8841, in exchange for hostage custody and execution readiness." Vali blanched. "I want counsel." "You'll get one," Rose said, "after you're booked." In the main nave, Esteban Martinez was being led out in restraints beside 2 bishops and a judge who had donated to his scholarship fund. He passed Rose without looking at her until she spoke. "Dad." He stopped. She expected rage. She got something worse. Weary contempt. "You could have had everything," he said softly. "I have my name," she replied. He gave a small, bitter laugh and let the agents move him down the aisle. No applause followed, no music, just radio chatter, crying civilians, the clink of handcuffs on stone. The old order didn't fall elegantly. It fell loud. On the cathedral steps, rain began again. Hostages were brought out wrapped in thermal blankets. Rose saw her aunt first, bruised, furious, alive. She ran down 2 steps, nearly tripped on her train, and caught her aunt in both arms. "Mi niña," her aunt whispered into her hair. "You stubborn, impossible girl." Rose laughed and sobbed at the same time. "You're okay?" "I will be. You?" Rose looked at the blood on her gown, at tactical teams securing the square, at reporters shouting questions she would answer under oath, not to cameras. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. Celia Grant met her near a black SUV, rain beating on a navy suit. "You just gave me probable cause on a silver platter," Grant said, "and 3 states of indictments." Rose handed her the phone from Adriano. "Annex call log, live command voice, Valley confirmation." Grant took it, eyes sharp. "You did good in there. I got Mateo killed." Grant's expression softened by a degree. "You got him targeted by men who were already killing people for balance sheets. Don't hand them your guilt too." Rose nodded once, not believing it yet, but storing it for later. Paramedics loaded Rafi into an ambulance, still arguing with a nurse about laptop access. June sat on a curb while an EMT splinted her wrist properly, eyes scanning rooftops out of habit. Luca came down the steps last, shirt torn, a cut over his cheekbone, cuffs of his suit dark with someone else's blood. He stopped in front of Rose, searching her face the way you search a horizon after artillery, checking what's still standing. "You hit him center shoulder," he said. "You taught me to keep my finger off the trigger unless I meant it." A flicker of something like pride, like grief, crossed his face. "You meant it." Sirens faded into a steadier city hum. Rain washed streaks of blood toward the storm drains. For the first time in 48 hours, Rose's hands stopped shaking. 3 months later, the federal courthouse cafeteria served terrible coffee and impossible quiet. Rose sat at a corner table in a navy suit with no jewelry except a plain watch. Her testimony that morning had run 6 hours. Ledger architecture, laundering pathways, coercive conservatorship abuse, homicide directives disguised as family protocol. She had watched jurors stop seeing runaway bride and start seeing forensic witness. Across from her, Luca unwrapped a stale turkey sandwich and inspected it like an IED. "Poison?" Rose asked. "Worse. Mayo." She snorted into her coffee. Silence settled, easy and unfamiliar. Outside the glass wall, reporters clustered under umbrellas. Inside, nobody bowed when she walked by. Nobody called her Mija like ownership. People called her Ms. Martinez and asked if she wanted cream. Luca set the sandwich down untouched. "I signed the cooperation agreement." She looked up. "This morning?" He nodded. "Comprehensive debrief, full operational disclosures, no immunity for violent acts outside scope. I gave them Palermo. Everything." Rose reached for his hand across the plastic table. "Thank you." He held on, thumb brushing her knuckles once. Then he drew a breath that seemed to cost him. "I need to say this clean," he said. "No mission language, no tactical framing." She waited. "I love you." The words were rough, unpracticed. "Not because you're strong, though you are. Not because you survived me, though you did. I love you because you choose people when power offers you easier math. I love you because you terrify men who think women are paperwork. I love you because when everything burned, you still asked who else could be saved." Rose's throat tightened. He kept going, eyes steady on hers. "I spent most of my life being useful. To commanders, to cousins, to men with rings and rules. With you, I want to be accountable. If you want distance, I'll give it. If you want partnership, I'm in. If you want nothing, I will still keep my word and keep you safe until you tell me to stop." Tears pricked, hot and sudden. She let them come. "Luca," she said, voice unsteady. "I don't need a savior. I don't need a handler. I need someone who asks before he takes a step that affects my life." He nodded immediately. "Then I ask now." She laughed through tears. "You didn't even ask a question." He almost smiled. "Will you let me stay as your partner, in public and in private, day by day, consent by consent?" Rose stood, walked around the table, and sat on the bench beside him instead of across. She took his face in both hands, tracing the healing cut at his cheekbone. "Yes," she whispered. "You can stay." He closed his eyes briefly, forehead resting against hers. No grand gesture, no cathedral. Just two people in a courthouse cafeteria with bad coffee and a future they were building from scratch. When he kissed her, it was slow and asking, and she answered without hesitation. Late spring brought heat to San Antonio and lease negotiations to a converted rail warehouse on the south side. The old loading bays had become glass-walled offices and dispatch stations. A new sign went up in steel letters: Martinez Logistics and Transit. No crest, no saints, no bloodline slogan. In the main floor briefing room, Rose stood before 24 employees. Former drivers, warehouse clerks, dispatchers, bookkeepers, 3 mechanics from companies once used as fronts. Some had family members under indictment. Some had testified. All needed paychecks that didn't come with funeral clauses. "We are filing taxes," Rose said to a ripple of nervous laughter. "Every dollar traced, every route audited. Any client asks for blind cargo, you escalate to compliance and walk away." A hand rose, one of the rescued drivers from the annex, still with faint rope marks at his wrist. "And if they threaten us?" Rose glanced at Luca, who stood near the door in a plain suit, no ring now, an earpiece and a tablet instead of a weapon on display. "Then, security handles it," she said. "And federal partners handle the rest. Nobody here dies for a shipment." June, her wrist fully healed, now head of field operations, clicked to the next slide. Safety protocols, anonymous reporting line, trauma counseling schedule. Rafi, on crutches but grinning, demoed the new compliance software with 2-factor authentication and 0 patience for sloppy passwords. After the meeting, Rose stepped into her office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked freight tracks, where legal cargo moved under afternoon sun. On her desk sat a manila envelope from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Inside, notice that Adriano Moretti had accepted a plea agreement to avoid life without parole. Esteban Martinez and Vittorio Moretti remained in federal custody awaiting trial on RICO conspiracy, narcotics trafficking, and murder for hire counts. Rose read it once, folded it, and set it aside. No triumph, just weight redistributed. A knock on the glass. Luca leaned in. "You have 10 minutes before City Hall." She checked the clock. "We're doing this on a Tuesday between vendor calls and a deposition?" "You said no spectacle." "I did." At City Hall, there were no orchids, no quartet, no armed ushers disguised as staff. Just fluorescent lights, a bored clerk named Denise, June and Rafi as witnesses, and Rose's aunt dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief while pretending not to cry. Rose wore a simple cream dress and low heels. Luca wore a dark suit with the jacket off and sleeves rolled to his forearms. When the clerk asked for rings, Luca reached into his pocket, then stopped. "May I?" he asked softly. Rose held out her hand. "Yes." He slid a plain gold band onto her finger like it was a promise and a question both. She did the same for him. They read vows they had written themselves on folded index cards. "Rose, I promise to tell you the truth even when it costs me comfort. I promise not to confuse silence with peace. I promise my choice, daily, freely. Luca, I promise to ask, not assume. To stand beside you, not in front of you. To use what I am for what we build, not what we fear." Denise pronounced them married in under 90 seconds and asked them to clear the room because another civil ceremony was waiting. Outside, the afternoon sun was too bright. Traffic hummed. Nobody bowed. Nobody watched except a man selling elotes on the corner and a pair of courthouse pigeons fighting over a breadcrumb. Rose leaned against Luca on the city hall steps, looking out at a city that had once been mapped as territory and now looked, for the first time, like home. She thought of chandeliers and cufflinks and the smile she had worn like armor. Then she looked at her husband. No crest on his hand now, only a plain band and a scarred knuckle brushing hers, and smiled without permission, without performance, without fear. The most dangerous men in Texas still wore cufflinks, but she didn't belong to them anymore.